On a stormy night, Lily finds an elderly woman abandoned on the street, shivering and confused. What seemed like a simple act of kindness turns into a shocking discovery. The woman is no ordinary beggar, but the mother of a powerful and arrogant businessman who discarded her like trash when she fell ill. The 13-year-old girl decides to confront the powerful son and expose the brutal truth in a way no one could have imagined. And from that moment, everything would change. If stories that touch the heart and awaken our humanity make sense to you, subscribe to our channel. You're part of this family that believes in the power of kindness. And the torrential downpour of an early Tuesday morning turned the streets of the Upper East Side into dark rivers, as the few cars navigating the affluent New York City neighborhood created waves of dirty water that splashed onto the deserted sidewalks. The rhythmic sound of the drops against the asphalt echoed between the high walls of the mansions, creating a melancholic symphony that seemed to foreshadow extraordinary events. Lily walked hurriedly down Madison Avenue, her small hands firmly gripping the plastic bag from Maria's bakery. At 13, she already carried responsibilities on her shoulders that many children her age knew nothing about. Her large, expressive brown eyes shone with a determination that contrasted with her slight frame. Her dark hair, wet from the rain, clung to her face as she quickened her pace, anxious to get home and deliver the medicine she had picked up from the 24-hour pharmacy. Over the last few years, the girl had developed a keen intuition for sensing when something was out of place. It was a skill born from the necessity of caring for her 83-year-old grandmother, Grace, who had lived with her ever since her parents had moved out of state for work. This same intuition made her slow her pace when she spotted a hunched figure on the sidewalk near an abandoned bus stop. Under the yellowish light of a lone streetlight, an elderly woman was sitting on the wet ground, leaning against an iron railing. Her clothes, which even soaked revealed a superior quality, contrasted sharply with her vulnerable position. The grey wool coat, now heavy with water, and a modest skirt, suggested someone of means, but her current state told a completely different story. Lily hesitated for only a second. Her characteristic stubbornness, which often got her into trouble, at school now manifested as an absolute refusal to ignore someone in need. She approached slowly, her cheap sneakers swishing against the wet concrete. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Lily asked, her youthful voice filled with genuine concern. The woman slowly lifted her face, revealing aristocratic features marked by time and suffering. Her blue eyes, though clouded with confusion, retained traces of an elegance that time had not managed to completely erase. Eleanor Vance, 79 years old, tried to focus her gaze on the child before her, but the words seemed to escape her hazy mind. I don't know where I am," Eleanor murmured, her trembling voice revealing a refined accent that spoke of decades of privileged education. "My son, he said he would come back for me." Lily felt her heart sink. There was something deeply wrong with this situation. No responsible son would leave his elderly mother alone on the street during a storm. She looked around, searching for any sign of a vehicle or a person who might have left the woman there, but the streets were completely deserted. "What's your name, ma'am?" Lily asked, crouching down to be at eye level with the woman. "Eleanor," the lady replied, her voice gaining a bit more clarity. "I was at the doctor's and there were a lot of people in white coats. And then—" She trailed off, bringing a hand to her head with an expression of pain and confusion. Lily noticed details a typical child might miss. The diamond ring on the lady's finger, even wet, impressively caught the lamplight. Her shoes, though soiled by the rain, were genuine leather and clearly expensive. There was a glaring inconsistency between the quality of her belongings and her current situation. "Mrs. Eleanor, you can't stay out here in the rain. I'll help." "You up okay?" Lily put an arm around the woman's shoulders, surprised by her fragility. Eleanor weighed less than she expected, as if the years and sadness had consumed her physical substance. Together they slowly stood up, the rain continuing to fall relentlessly upon them. "My house is nearby," Lily said, her determination growing by the second. "My grandma always says you don't leave anyone on the street, especially not the elderly." As they walked slowly along the slippery sidewalk, Lily couldn't imagine that a few miles away, in a luxurious penthouse office in Midtown, Richard Vance was signing multi-million-dollar contracts with foreign investors. The 53-year-old businessman, with his impeccable designer suits and a Swiss watch that cost more than many people make in a year, had deliberately left his mother on that street after discovering she would need constant, specialized care. For Richard, Eleanor had become an inconvenient obstacle to his plans for international expansion. The investors valued strong family values, but they also expected partners who could be fully dedicated to the business. A mother with special medical needs did not fit the image he wanted to project. Lily and Eleanor arrived at the modest house where the girl lived with her grandmother in the South Bronx. The residence, painted a light blue with white trim, contrasted sharply with the mansions of the wealthy area where they had met. The small front yard, carefully tended by Grandma Grace, displayed flowers that bravely withstood the night's rain. "Grandma Grace," Lily called out, still supporting Eleanor, "I need help." The door opened to reveal an 83-year-old woman, short and energetic, whose eyes immediately assessed the situation. Grace Peterson had been an elementary school teacher for 40 years and had developed a maternal instinct that extended far beyond her own family. "Oh my goodness, child, what happened?" Grace asked, immediately moving to help support Eleanor. "I found her on the street, Grandma. She was alone in the rain, said her son was coming to get her, but—" Lily didn't finish the sentence, but the look she exchanged with her grandmother spoke volumes. Grace didn't hesitate. In her culture and upbringing, abandoning the elderly was unthinkable. "Bring her inside immediately. We'll get her some dry clothes and a hot cup of tea." As they helped Eleanor into the modest home, none of the three women could imagine that this moment of compassion would trigger a series of events that would expose the cruelest face of American society, but also reveal the extraordinary strength that emerges when human kindness refuses to be silenced. Grace's house, with its walls decorated with family photographs and its simple but well-kept furniture, welcomed Eleanor like a safe harbor in the storm, literally and figuratively. The aroma of coffee, always present in the kitchen, mixed with the smell of rain coming through the open windows, created a welcoming atmosphere that Eleanor hadn't felt in months. Lily watched her new guest's every move, her sharp intuition picking up on details that would form a complex puzzle in the coming days. There were mysteries about Eleanor that a 13-year-old girl was determined to unravel, never imagining that her characteristic stubbornness was about to confront one of the most powerful men in New York City. The first rays of the next morning's sun filtered through the floral curtains of Grace's living room, revealing Eleanor sitting on the sofa, intently observing an old upright piano that occupied the corner of the room. Her hands, elegant despite her age, trembled slightly as she extended her fingers, as if playing invisible keys. Lily had woken up early, as she always did, but this time it wasn't just to prepare breakfast and her grandmother's medicine. She watched Eleanor with growing curiosity, noticing how the woman seemed more lucid in the daylight, although she still showed moments of confusion that left her lost mid-sentence. "Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor," Lily said softly, approaching with a warm cup of coffee with milk. "How did you sleep?" Eleanor turned slowly, a faint smile lighting up her face. "Better than I have in a long time, dear. It's been so long since I've heard the sound of a house full of life." She trailed off as if the next words were too painful to speak. Grace emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray with still warm homemade bread. Her experienced eyes had caught something during the night that deeply troubled her. Eleanor's clothes, now dry and clearly visible in the daylight, told a story that didn't align with her being abandoned on the street. "Mrs. Eleanor," Grace said gently, sitting in a nearby chair, "do you remember how you ended up on that street last night?" Eleanor closed her eyes, concentrating. Fragments of memory danced in her mind like pieces of an incomplete puzzle. "I was at Dr. Wallace's office. He used difficult words, said I would need special care." Her voice broke for a moment. "Richard was with me. He seemed very agitated, talking on the phone the whole time about international investors." Lily and Grace exchanged significant glances. The name Richard had come up, and with it an important clue. "And after the office?" Lily asked, her sharp intuition grasping the importance of the moment. "We walked to the car. Richard drove in silence, very serious. We stopped on a street I didn't recognize." Eleanor brought her hand to her forehead, as if trying to force the memories to organize themselves. He said he had to take care of something quickly, asked me to wait. He said he'd be back in 5 minutes. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Grace, with her life experience, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Lily, despite her youth, felt a rage building in her chest, a pure indignation at the injustice. "What kind of son abandons his own mother on the street?" Lily murmured, more to herself than to the others. Eleanor heard her, and her eyes filled with tears. "He was always ambitious, ever since he was a boy. But I hoped that in the end family meant something to him." Over the following days, Lily established a careful routine. In the morning, before school, she helped Eleanor with simple memory exercises she had researched at the school library. In the afternoon after her classes, she dedicated herself to practical care, medication, basic physical therapy, and especially sessions at the old piano. It was during one of these musical sessions that Lily discovered something extraordinary about Eleanor. When the elderly woman placed her hands on the keys, all her mental confusion seemed to dissipate. Her hands found the melodies with a precision that defied her apparent condition. "I was a piano teacher for 40 years, Eleanor revealed during a moment of absolute clarity, her fingers dancing over a Chopin sonata. "I taught hundreds of children. Some became professional musicians." Lily was fascinated not only by the musical skill, but by the complete transformation that occurred in Eleanor during these sessions. It was as if the music was a key that unlocked doors in her mind. Meanwhile, Richard Vance was facing his own challenges. In his panoramic office in downtown Manhattan, he received daily reports from private investigators he had hired to create a convincing narrative about his mother's mysterious disappearance. "Mr. Vance," said Mr. Davis, his lead attorney, "we need to be very careful with this situation. If anyone finds out you were with your mother the day she disappeared—" Richard cut him off with an impatient gesture. "No one is going to find out anything. My mother was confused. She wandered off on her own. It's a perfectly believable story for someone in her condition." But even as he spoke those words, Richard felt a pang of unease that he tried to drown in excessive work and endless meetings. The international investors valued family stability, and the narrative of a devoted son desperately searching for his missing mother was working perfectly for his business purposes. In the South Bronx, life at Grace's house had taken on its own rhythm. Eleanor slowly was beginning to show more moments of lucidity, especially when she felt safe and loved. Lily observed these transformations with the attention of a young scientist, making connections that adults might have missed. "Grandma Grace," Lily said one afternoon while helping prepare dinner, "don't you think it's weird that Mrs. Eleanor has such expensive clothes, but was abandoned as if she were disposable?" Grace stopped peeling potatoes and looked at her granddaughter with pride. The girl had inherited not only her stubbornness, but also her ability to see beyond the surface of things. "Weird is an understatement, my child. But what worries me more is what we're going to do when we find out the whole truth." Lily didn't answer right away, but her eyes shone with a determination that Grace recognized as dangerous. The girl was up to something, and when Lily decided something was unfair, she wouldn't rest until she corrected it. That night, after Eleanor had fallen asleep on the living room sofa, lulled by the soft sound of the returning rain, Lily made a discovery that would change everything. While folding Eleanor's clothes, she found an elegant business card in the inner pocket of the coat. "Dr. Henry Wallace, Geriatric Neurology, the Vance Clinic for Advanced Medicine." The last name on the card made Lily's heart race. Vance. The same name Eleanor had mentioned when talking about Richard. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. Lily held the card with trembling hands, her mind processing the implications. If Eleanor was a Vance, and there was a clinic with that name, then Richard wasn't just some cruel son. He was someone with enough resources to have a medical clinic bearing his name. The discovery triggered a mixture of anger and determination in Lily that she had never felt before. Her characteristic stubbornness, which often put her at odds with teachers and classmates, now had a higher purpose. She would not allow someone, no matter how powerful, to treat an elderly person like disposable trash. In the early hours of the morning, while the house slept, Lily stayed awake in the kitchen, holding the business card and forming a plan. She didn't know exactly how yet, but she was determined to find out the whole truth about Eleanor and confront Richard Vance. What she didn't imagine was that her quest for justice was about to awaken forces far greater than a 13-year-old girl could control on her own. But Lily possessed something that Richard, with all his power and money, had lost over the years: a deep connection to what was right and wrong, and an absolute refusal to accept injustice. The second part of the journey was just beginning, and the decisions made in that simple house would reverberate far beyond the walls that sheltered three women, united by compassion and the determination to do the right thing. The following Monday brought a significant change to the household routine. Lily had made a decision over the weekend. She would use the school computer to investigate the business card she had found. Her determination was palpable, but she knew she had to be discreet. During recess, while her classmates played in the yard, Lily headed to the school library. The librarian, Miss Carmen, knew the girl well and her insatiable thirst for knowledge, so she wasn't surprised when she asked to use the computer for a school project. With slightly trembling fingers, Lily typed "The Vance Clinic, New York" into the search engine. What appeared on the screen left her momentarily breathless. The Vance Clinic was one of the most prestigious medical institutions in New York City, specializing in advanced neurological treatments. In the website's photos, she immediately recognized Dr. Henry Wallace, but it was the About Us section that made her heart pound. Founded in 1987 by businessman Richard Vance, the clinic was born from a desire to honor the memory of his late wife, Eleanor Vance, by offering excellence in the treatment of neurological diseases. Lily read the sentence several times. Eleanor Vance. Eleanor. The pieces were starting to fit together in a way that made her nauseous. She clicked on the clinic's news section and found recent articles about Richard Vance. The photos showed a distinguished-looking man with graying hair combed back, always wearing impeccable suits. But it was in a photo from 2 years ago, at a clinic charity event, that Lily found the confirmation she was looking for. In the image, Richard Vance was posing next to an elegant elderly lady, both smiling. The caption read, "Richard Vance and his mother Eleanor Vance during the clinic's annual charity gala." It was her. Without a shadow of a doubt, it was the same woman who was now sleeping on the sofa in Grace's house, the same one who had been abandoned in the rain as if she were an inconvenient burden. Lily discreetly printed the photo and a few articles, hiding them in her backpack. Her mind was buzzing with indignation and plans. She needed to be smart about how to use this information. That afternoon, when she got home, she found a scene that touched her deeply. Eleanor was at the piano playing a soft melody, while Grace sewed nearby, a serene smile on her face. The atmosphere in the house had transformed. There was an almost palpable harmony in the air. "Lily," Eleanor called, interrupting the music. "Come here, dear. I remembered a song I used to play when Richard was little." The girl approached, tightly, holding the printed papers in her backpack. Seeing Eleanor so lucid and affectionate made Richard's betrayal even more heinous. "Mrs. Eleanor," Lily said carefully, "do you remember attending social events, elegant dinners, photos for newspapers?" Eleanor stopped playing and looked at Lily with a mixture of surprise and sadness. "Of course I remember, dear. For years Richard took me to all the clinic events. He used to say I was his personal ambassador." She laughed bitterly. "I was useful for his public image." Grace looked up from her sewing, sensing the growing tension in the conversation. "But that changed when you started having memory problems?" Lily asked, her voice gentle but determined. "Gradually," Eleanor replied, her lucidity impressive in that moment. "At first he tried to hide my memory lapses from others. Then he started leaving me at home during important events. And finally—" She didn't finish the sentence. Lily took a deep breath. It was time to reveal what she had discovered. "Mrs. Eleanor, I found this in your coat pocket," she said, showing the card from Dr. Wallace. "And today at school I did some research on the Vance Clinic." She showed the printouts to Eleanor and Grace. The silence that followed was filled with complex emotions. Eleanor held the photo where she appeared with Richard, her hands trembling. "I remember this day. It was 2 years ago. He was so proud, talking about how the clinic was his legacy, how it honored his wife's memory. Tears began to stream down her face. I thought I was part of that legacy too. Grace got up and went to Eleanor, placing a caring hand on her shoulder. You are so much more than any legacy, my dear. You are a person with your own worth. Lily felt her outrage grow with each passing moment. He has a whole clinic with the family name, makes money using his wife's memory, but he abandons his own mother when she gets sick. Lily, Grace warned, gently, recognizing the dangerous tone in her granddaughter's voice. Be careful with that anger. It can lead you to places you don't want to go. But Lily had already made up her mind. Her characteristic stubbornness had found a higher purpose, and she would not back down. Over the following days, the dynamic in the house subtly changed. Eleanor, spurred by the discoveries and the certainty that her situation was not the result of her mental confusion, began to have increasingly long periods of lucidity. It was as if feeling valued and loved was healing not just her body, but also her mind. Lily established a new routine. In addition to her usual care, she began to document everything: Eleanor's moments of lucidity, her memories of Richard, and especially the impressive skills the woman displayed when she felt safe. It was during one of these documentation sessions that an incident occurred that would change everything. Lily had asked Eleanor to talk about her life before her illness when the front door opened abruptly. Mrs. Higgins, the most influential neighbor on the block, entered uninvited, as was her custom when she considered there were irregularities in the neighborhood. Grace, Mrs. Higgins called, her shrill voice cutting through the quiet atmosphere of the house. I need to talk to you about this situation. She stopped short upon seeing Eleanor at the piano, her clearly expensive clothes contrasting with the simple surroundings of the house. Who is this lady? Mrs. Higgins asked, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. Grace, you know you can't just shelter strangers in your home. What if her family is looking for her? What about the legal issues? Lily felt her blood boil. Mrs. Higgins's intrusion threatened the peace Eleanor had finally found. Mrs. Higgins, Lily said, her voice controlled but firm, Mrs. Eleanor is not a stranger. She is our guest. Guest? Mrs. Higgins laughed sarcastically. The 13-year-old girl doesn't make that kind of decision. Grace, you need to think about the consequences. Social services could question your ability to care for even Lily if they find out about this situation. The threat hung in the air, like a toxic cloud. Eleanor visibly shrank, the lucidity she had regained beginning to waver under the stress of the confrontation. Please, Eleanor whispered, I don't want to cause you any trouble. Maybe I should... No, Lily interrupted, her stubbornness erupting with full force. You're not going anywhere, not after what they did to you. Mrs. Higgins looked at Lily in surprise. What are you talking about, girl? It was in that moment that Lily made a decision that would define the course of all subsequent events. She looked at Eleanor, who nodded almost imperceptibly, and then at her grandmother, who closed her eyes as if she knew she couldn't stop what was coming. Mrs. Eleanor was abandoned by her own son, Lily said, her voice gaining strength. He's a wealthy businessman who owns a medical clinic, but when he found out she would need special care, he just left her on the street during a storm. Mrs. Higgins looked skeptical. How can you be sure of that? Lily went to her backpack and pulled out the printouts. Because I researched it. His name is Richard Vance. He has a famous clinic, and up until 2 years ago, he was taking Mrs. Eleanor to social events, but when she got sick, he threw her out like trash. The silence that followed was tense. Mrs. Higgins examined the papers, her expression gradually changing from skepticism to shock, and then to something resembling horror. My God, she murmured. If this is true... It is true, said Eleanor, her voice gaining a strength it hadn't shown in months, and I can prove it. Eleanor rose from the piano and went to the coat that Lily had carefully folded on a chair. From an inner pocket, she pulled out something no one had noticed before, a small digital recorder. Richard gave this to me years ago, so I could record reminders when my memory started to fail, she explained, her hands trembling slightly. I was still carrying it the day he abandoned me, and I recorded our last conversation. Lily felt her heart race. Grace approached, a mixture of pride and concern in her eyes. Even Mrs. Higgins fell silent, realizing the magnitude of what was being revealed. Eleanor looked at the three women around her, took a deep breath, and pressed the play button. Richard Vance's voice filled the room, cold and calculating, discussing how his mother's condition was interfering with important business opportunities and how it would be simpler if she just disappeared. The silence that followed was deafening. Lily felt tears of anger burning her eyes. Grace covered her mouth with her hands, shocked, and Mrs. Higgins, for the first time in years, was utterly speechless. Eleanor turned off the recorder and looked at Lily. "Now you understand why I pretended to be more confused than I really was. I was afraid that if someone knew I was lucid, he would find a way to silence me permanently." The revelation changed everything. Lily was no longer just dealing with the abandonment of an elderly woman. She was confronting a man who had deliberately planned his own mother's disappearance to protect his business interests. And at that moment, looking at Eleanor with new understanding and respect, Lily knew her fight was just beginning. She would not let Richard Vance continue his life as if nothing had happened, but she also knew she was up against an adversary, far more dangerous than she had initially imagined. The recording had changed everything. Mrs. Higgins, who had arrived intending to cause trouble, now became an unexpected ally. Her indignation was palpable as she paced the small living room, her hands gesturing energetically. "This is monstrous," she exclaimed, her face red with outrage. "Grace, we have to do something. We can't let this man get away with what he's done." Lily watched the neighbor's transformation with a mixture of relief and caution. Her keen intuition sensed that while Mrs. Higgins was now on their side, her dramatic nature could complicate things, if not properly channeled. "Mrs. Higgins," Lily said diplomatically, "we need to be very careful about how we handle this. Richard Vance is very powerful. He has a lot of money and influence." Eleanor, still holding the recorder, nodded gravely. "Lily is right. Richard didn't get where he is by being careless. If he finds out I have this recording or that you know the truth—" "He can't do anything to us," Grace interrupted, but her voice carried an uncertainty that Lily immediately picked up on. "Yes, he can, Grandma," Lily said, her mind already working on the possibilities. "Men like him have lawyers. They have connections. They can make our lives very difficult." In the following days, Lily developed a meticulous plan. She would use her ability to go unnoticed, an advantage of being just a 13-year-old girl, to gather more information about Richard Vance, but she knew she needed help. On a Thursday afternoon, Lily made a bold decision. She called the Vance Clinic, pretending to be a student doing a school project on successful entrepreneurs in New York. "I'd like to schedule an interview with Mr. Richard Vance," she said, slightly altering her voice to sound older. "It's for a project on social entrepreneurship." The secretary was receptive. "How interesting. Mr. Vance values education very much. Let me check his schedule." Lily held her breath, her heart pounding. "He has an opening next Tuesday at 3 p.m. But we'll need the name of the school and the project supervisors," Lily thought quickly. "It's a joint project between several schools. My teacher, Ms. Carmen, will be with me." She gave the librarian's name, hoping her lie wouldn't be discovered too quickly. "Perfect, we'll confirm the details by email." When she hung up, Lily realized she was sweating. She was stepping into dangerous territory, but her determination was unshakable. That night, Lily confessed her plan to Grace and Eleanor. The reaction was immediate and predictable. "Absolutely not," exclaimed Grace. "Lily, you have no idea the danger you're putting yourself in." "Grandma, I have to do this," Lily argued, her stubbornness emerging with full force. "If we do nothing, he'll go on living his life normally while Mrs. Eleanor suffers. It's not fair." Eleanor, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Grace, the girl is right. But Lily, you can't do this alone." "I'm not going alone," Lily said. "Ms. Carmen from the library is very nice. I'm sure she would help me if I explained the situation." Eleanor shook her head. "No, dear, you don't understand. If Richard finds out I'm alive and well, that I have the recording, he'll do anything to silence me, and that includes hurting anyone who is protecting me." The weight of this reality fell on Lily like a cold stone. She was playing with forces much bigger than she had imagined. It was then that Eleanor made a decision that surprised everyone. "I'm going with you," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Mrs. Eleanor, no," Grace protested. "It's too dangerous." "Grace, my dear," said Eleanor, her lucidity impressive at that moment. "I've spent the last few months living in fear, pretending to be sicker than I really am, accepting being treated like a burden. This brave child gave me back my dignity. Now it's time for me to do my part." Lily looked at Eleanor with growing admiration. The elderly woman, whom she had found frail and confused in the rain, was revealing herself to be a woman of extraordinary strength. "But how?" Lily asked. "If he sees you?" "Exactly," said Eleanor, a determined smile appearing on her face. "He will see me, and he will have to explain to his secretary, to the staff, to anyone present, why his missing mother is there, alive and well cared for." The plan began to take shape. Eleanor would show up at the clinic, accompanied by Lily and Ms. Carmen, demanding an explanation for why she was abandoned. The presence of witnesses would prevent Richard from taking any drastic action at that moment. Grace was tasked with a crucial part of the plan, contacting some of her former students who now worked for local newspapers. As a respected teacher, she still had connections in the community that could prove valuable. "If something goes wrong," Grace said, "we need to have the press ready to tell the story." In the days leading up to the fateful Tuesday, the house turned into a planning hub. Mrs. Higgins, using her nosy nature for a positive purpose, gathered information about Richard through the neighborhood gossip network. "He's planning a big opening next month," she reported during one visit. "A new wing of the clinic with political figures attending. His public image is very important to him right now." Lily absorbed every piece of information, her strategic mind processing how to use it all to her advantage. On Monday night, the eve of the planned confrontation, Lily had a moment of profound doubt. Sitting in her room, looking at the printed photos of Richard Vance, she wondered if she really had the courage to face such a powerful man. It was then that she heard the soft sound of the piano coming from the living room. Eleanor was playing a melancholic but beautiful melody. Lily got up and went to the living room, finding the elderly woman at the piano with Grace sitting nearby knitting. "Can't sleep either?" Eleanor asked, smiling gently at Lily. "I'm scared," Lily confessed, her vulnerability showing for the first time. "What if everything goes wrong? What if he hurts you because of me?" Eleanor stopped playing and looked deeply into Lily's eyes. "Dear, you've already saved me from something far worse than anything Richard can do now." "What do you mean?" "You gave me back my dignity. You showed me that I still have value, that I can still be loved and cared for. Even if everything goes wrong tomorrow, you've already given me the greatest gift one person can give another. You made me feel human again." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes. In that moment, she understood that her fight wasn't just about justice. It was about the fundamental value of human life, about refusing to accept that people can be discarded when they become inconvenient. "Besides," Eleanor continued, resuming her soft playing, "I have faith that God didn't bring us this far to abandon us now. Sometimes he uses the most unlikely people, like a stubborn 13-year-old girl, to bring about his justice in the world." Lily felt a new strength growing inside her. It wasn't just her characteristic stubbornness, but something deeper, a conviction that some battles are worth fighting, regardless of the odds. "Tomorrow," Lily said, her voice gaining determination, "we're going to show Richard Vance that some people can't just be thrown away." Eleanor smiled and continued to play, her music filling the house with a sense of hope and courage. Grace looked at her granddaughter with a mixture of pride and worry, but also with the certainty that she had raised an extraordinary young woman. The next morning, as they prepared for the confrontation that would change all their lives, none of the three women could imagine that their courage would inspire a far greater transformation than they had planned. They were about to discover that sometimes, when ordinary people decide to do the right thing, they can move mountains. Tuesday morning dawned clear and sunny, a stark contrast to the tension hanging in Grace's house. Lily had woken before her, alarm, her stomach in a knot of nerves and determination. Today was the day of the confrontation with Richard Vance. Ms. Carmen, the school librarian, had been carefully briefed on the real situation the night before. Initially shocked by the revelation, she quickly joined the cause when she heard Richard's recording. As an educator for over 20 years, she had a natural aversion to injustice, especially when it involved the abandonment of the elderly. "Lily," Ms. Carmen said as they prepared to leave, "are you sure you want to do this? Once we walk into that clinic, there's no turning back." Lily looked at Eleanor, who was dressed in her finest clothes, a navy blue suit that Grace had carefully ironed and fitted. The elderly woman's transformation was remarkable. Her hair was elegantly styled, her erect posture showed a recovered dignity, and her eyes shone with a determination that Lily recognized as a mirror of her own. "We're ready, Ms. Carmen," Lily replied, her voice firm despite her nerves. The Vance Clinic was located in one of New York's most prestigious areas, an imposing building of glass and marble that screamed success and power. When the taxi dropped them at the main entrance, Lily felt momentarily intimidated by the magnificence of the place. "Courage, my dear," Eleanor whispered, gently squeezing Lily's hand. "Remember, behind all this grandeur is a man who abandoned his own mother." The clinic's reception was a sea of white marble and expensive designer furniture. The receptionist, an impeccably dressed young woman, smiled professionally as they approached. "Good morning. Are you here for the scheduled interview with Mr. Vance?" she asked, consulting an electronic calendar. "Yes," replied Ms. Carmen, her voice controlled. "We're from the School for the Entrepreneurship Project." "Perfect. Mr. Vance will see you in a few minutes. Please have a seat." While they waited in the luxurious reception area, Lily discreetly observed the clinic's activity. Doctors and nurses moved with professional efficiency, well-dressed patients were attended to with deference, and everywhere there were photographs of Richard Vance at social events and award ceremonies. It was then that Lily noticed something that made her blood boil. A large framed photograph near the reception showed Richard Vance receiving an award for excellence in geriatric care. The irony was so cruel that she had to stop herself from making a sarcastic comment. "The young ladies from the school?" A male voice interrupted her thoughts. Lily turned and saw a tall, elegant man approaching. It was him, Richard Vance. In photos, he looked powerful. In person, his presence was even more intimidating. His graying hair was perfectly combed, his suit was clearly very expensive, and his cold eyes scanned the visitors with the calculating gaze of someone used to assessing people's worth. "I'm Richard Vance," he said, extending his hand to Ms. Carmen. "It's a pleasure to host students interested in entrepreneurship." His gaze passed briefly over Lily, just a child, seemingly unimportant, and then landed on Eleanor. What happened? Next was like watching a movie in slow motion. Richard's face visibly paled, his eyes widened in shock, and his outstretched hand froze in midair. For a moment that seemed an eternity. He stood completely paralyzed, staring at the woman he had deliberately abandoned weeks ago. "Hello, Richard," Eleanor said, her voice calm but loaded with meaning. "What a surprise to find you here." The receptionist looked confusedly between them. A few nearby employees began to realize something unusual was happening. The silence in the reception area became almost tangible. Richard recovered quickly, his calculating mind kicking into gear. "Mother," he exclaimed, forcing a smile and approaching as if to embrace her. "My God, where have you been? We've been looking for you desperately." But Eleanor took a step back, avoiding the false hug. "Really?" she said, her voice gaining strength. "Looking where, exactly?" Lily watched the exchange with full attention, ready to intervene if necessary. Ms. Carmen remained alert, sensing the growing tension in the situation. "Mother, you're confused," Richard said, trying to control the situation. "You got lost after your doctor's appointment. We've been looking for you for weeks." "I didn't get lost, Richard," Eleanor replied, her voice echoing through the silent reception. "You abandoned me." A murmur ran through the employees present. The receptionist stared in shock, trying to process what she was hearing. Richard realized he was losing control of the situation. "Let's talk in my office," he said, trying to sound paternal but failing to hide the panic in his voice. "No," said Lily, speaking for the first time since they arrived. Her young voice cut through the air like a blade. We'll talk right here in front of everyone. Richard looked at Lily as if seeing her for the first time. And who are you, little girl? I'm the person who found your mother abandoned in the rain, Lily replied, her stubbornness and courage taking over completely. I'm the person who took care of her while you pretended to look for her. The shock on the clinic staff's faces was visible. Some began to whisper among themselves, while others discreetly took out their cell phones to record. This is ridiculous, Richard said, trying to laugh off the situation. A child obviously doesn't understand the complexity of my mother's medical condition. I may not understand medicine, Lily retorted, but I understand the difference between right and wrong. Eleanor stepped forward, positioning herself beside Lily. She's right, Richard. And I have proof of what you did. Richard froze. What proof? Eleanor took the small digital recorder from her purse. Our last conversation, son, every word you said about how I was an inconvenient burden and how it would be simpler if I just disappeared. The silence in the reception was deafening. Everyone present, staff, patients, visitors, was paralyzed, watching the drama unfold. Richard made one last desperate attempt. Mother, you're clearly confused. Your mental state. My mental state is perfectly clear, Eleanor interrupted, her voice gaining an authority Lily had never heard before. Clear enough to remember that you built this clinic using the name of your deceased wife, my daughter-in-law Elena, claiming to honor her memory. But when your own mother got sick, you threw me away like trash. It was at that moment that something extraordinary happened. Dr. Henry Wallace, the neurologist who had treated Eleanor, emerged from a side corridor. He had heard the commotion and came to investigate. Mrs. Vance, he exclaimed, genuinely surprised and relieved. Thank God. Where have you been? They cancelled all your follow-up appointments, told us you had disappeared. Richard paled even more. The doctor's presence drastically complicated his situation. Dr. Wallace, said Eleanor, do you remember what we discussed at the last appointment? About me needing constant special care. Of course I remember, and I stressed to your son the importance of maintaining treatment and regular follow-ups. Eleanor turned to Richard, her eyes shining with a mixture of sadness and determination. And what was your response to that recommendation, Richard? The noose was tightening. Richard looked around, realizing that all escape routes had been blocked. Staff were recording with their phones, the doctor was present as a witness, and his mother, whom he thought he had permanently eliminated from his life, was there lucid and determined. Lily watched everything with a mixture of satisfaction and compassion. Her intuition had been right from the start. There was much more to Eleanor's story than it seemed. But seeing Richard fall apart in front of everyone didn't bring her the vengeful joy she had expected. Instead, she felt a deep sadness for the total breakdown of family bonds. Richard, said Eleanor, her voice now soft but laden with disappointment, I raised you. I loved you. I supported you in every dream you had. And when I needed you most, you abandoned me as if I never meant anything. Tears began to roll down the elderly woman's face, but they were not tears of weakness. They were the tears of a mother confronting the reality of having raised a son capable of such cruelty. It was at that moment that Richard finally broke. Maybe it was the weight of the judgmental stares around him. Maybe it was seeing his mother cry, or maybe it was simply the recognition that he had gone too far. He collapsed into a nearby chair, covering his face with his hands. I didn't know what to do, he murmured, his voice muffled. The investors, the contracts, everything depended on my public image. I thought it would be easier if I just disappeared, Eleanor completed. Like a problem that goes away when you ignore it. Lily felt it was time to deliver the final blow. She approached Richard, her small stature contrasting with the weight of her words. Mr. Vance, she said, her young voice laden with a maturity that impressed everyone present. You built a medical empire claiming to care for people. But when your own mother needed care, you abandoned her. How do you expect anyone to trust your medical care after this? The question echoed through the reception like a funeral bell, and Lily knew that in that moment she had sealed not only the confrontation with Richard, but also his public and professional fate. The fifth part of the journey was coming to an end, but Lily could feel that the true consequences of her actions were just beginning to unfold. What happened in the following minutes completely transformed the fate of everyone involved. Dr. Henry Wallace, visibly shaken by the revelations, asked to speak with Eleanor in private, but she refused. "No, doctor," Eleanor said, her voice firm. "If you have something to tell me about my condition, you can say it in front of everyone. I'm tired of secrets and half-truths." Dr. Wallace looked nervously at Richard, then at the growing crowd of employees and patients who were discreetly gathering to listen to the unfolding situation. "Mrs. Vance," he began carefully, "your most recent tests showed that your condition has stabilized. With proper care and regular medication, you can maintain an excellent quality of life for many years." Lily felt a wave of indignation rise within her. So she didn't need to be hospitalized or have special care that would interfere with anyone's life. No, the doctor answered honestly. She needed regular medical follow-up, medication, and above all, social and emotional stimulation. In fact, isolation and abandonment could have significantly worsened her condition. The impact of this revelation was devastating. Richard had abandoned his mother not because she was an uncontrollable medical burden, but simply because her presence threatened his perfect public image. It was at that moment that Lily noticed several people were recording the scene with their cell phones. Among them, she recognized two familiar faces, local reporters whom Grace had contacted through her former students. "Mr. Vance," one of the reporters said, approaching with a microphone, "can you comment on the allegations that you deliberately abandoned your mother after finding out she would need ongoing medical care?" Richard lifted his head, his face a mask of despair. This is a misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding," Eleanor interrupted, taking the recorder out of her purse again. "And I can prove it." With hands that trembled slightly, but with a firm voice, she activated the device. Richard's voice filled the silent reception, every word a condemnation of his own cruelty. "The international investors value family stability, but they also need partners who can be fully dedicated to the business. A mother with constant special needs doesn't fit the image I need to project. It would be simpler if she just disappeared." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of recording cell phones and the tears that Eleanor could no longer hold back. Lily, seeing the suffering of the woman she had grown to love like a second grandmother, felt a deep compassion, even for Richard. She approached him, her small hand gently touching his arm. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice filled with a wisdom that was surprising for a 13-year-old. "It's not too late to do the right thing." Richard looked at Lily, then at his mother, and finally at all the faces around him. Slowly, he stood up and walked over to Eleanor. "Mother," he said, his voice breaking, "I made the worst mistake of my life. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I have to try to redeem myself." Eleanor looked deep into her son's eyes. For a long moment, mother and son stared at each other, decades of history between them. "Richard," she said finally, "forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you choose to give, and I choose to forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean the consequences of your actions will disappear." In the days that followed, the story of Eleanor and Lily spread like wildfire through the media. The video of the confrontation at the clinic went viral, sparking a national debate on elder abandonment and family responsibility. Richard Vance lost multi-million-dollar contracts, faced ethics investigations, and saw his professional reputation completely crumble. But, surprisingly, he didn't try to hide or deny his actions. Instead, he did something no one expected. A week after the confrontation, Richard showed up at Grace's house. Lily, initially wary, answered the door. "May I speak with my mother?" he asked humbly. Lily led him into the living room where Eleanor was at the piano, playing a soft melody. She stopped when she saw him, but showed no surprise. "Mother," Richard said, kneeling beside the piano, "I've come to ask not only for your forgiveness, but for your help." "My help for what?" Eleanor asked carefully. "To turn my mistake into something positive. I want to use the clinic, my resources, my experience, to create a home care program for the elderly. A program that ensures no family has to choose between caring for their parents and maintaining their professional lives." Lily watched the conversation intently, her intuition gauging the sincerity in Richard's words. "And why should I believe?" "You?" Eleanor asked. "Because," Richard said, looking directly at Lily, "a 13-year-old girl taught me that some things are more important than money or success, and because I want my future daughter to know that her father wasn't just a man who made a terrible mistake, but someone who learned how to fix it." It was in that moment that Lily felt something shift inside her. Her anger had transformed into something greater, an understanding that true justice isn't about punishment, but about transformation. 3 months later, Grace's house had become a small community hub. Eleanor, now with her health stabilized and her dignity restored, gave piano lessons to neighborhood children. Lily, who had become a minor local celebrity, used her influence to promote causes related to the well-being of the elderly. Richard kept his promise. The Vance Clinic launched the Eleanor program, offering free home care for low-income families with seniors in need. He also funded scholarships for young people interested in geriatrics and palliative care. But perhaps the most profound change happened within the family itself. Richard began to visit his mother regularly, not as a duty, but as a son who had finally learned the value of having a mother. He brought his new wife and baby daughter to meet Eleanor, slowly rebuilding the family ties he had almost destroyed. Lily in turn discovered her true calling. Inspired by her experience with Eleanor, she decided to dedicate her life to caring for abandoned seniors. At 13, she was already speaking in schools about the importance of valuing the elderly, and her dream was to become a geriatric doctor. One Sunday afternoon, 6 months after their first encounter in the rain, Lily sat in the front yard, watching Eleanor teach piano to a group of small children. The elderly woman, with her now well-kept hair and radiant smile, was the personification of the transformation that love and care can bring. "Lily," Grace called from the porch, "phone for you." It was a reporter from a national magazine wanting to interview Lily about her work with abandoned seniors. At 13, she was already receiving invitations to give talks and had inspired the creation of similar programs in other cities. "What would you say to other kids who see injustice around them?" the reporter asked. Lily thought for a moment, looking at Eleanor laughing with the children in the yard. "I would say that age doesn't matter when it comes to doing the right thing," she answered. "Sometimes God uses the most unlikely people to do his work in the world, and when you see someone being treated unfairly, especially the weakest and most vulnerable, you have a choice. You can pretend you didn't see it,